that doesn't touch money. And so it's not about money, and yet you're able to be abundant in all these areas as an artist. And most artists, and you and I both have talked about this, die broke and alone. And why you, as an artist, a musician, a scientist, a chemist, why do you think that you are able to do that and be successful monetarily?
I think a few things in my life have certainly helped me. One is that I was blessed with a limited attention span.
No, that's nowadays it's like no one knows ADD. Like
I
you're
know
not.
I was blessed with a limited attention span.
How is that a good thing?
Well,
Because nowadays people get drugs for that.
I know.
You
well,
know that, right?
Of
Like
course I
ADD
do.
is not good.
Of course I do, but this is not ADD.
Okay.
It's a
All right.
limited, slightly different thing. I was blessed by being brought up in a house where we never had very much money. After the war in England was not the greatest place to be. So everything we did, we had to do for ourselves. We grew our own food. We made everything. I had to make my own bicycle. Everything I owned as a child. I built my own chess set even. I had to do all that stuff because we just simply never had the money to do it.
But there's people that had no money that weren't inspired to build their own chess set.
Yeah, but my father always sort of brought us up with that attitude, that sort of can-do attitude, without even knowing it, is that there was nothing really that we couldn't do if we really set our mind to it, and so we just did it. And when I grew up, I learned, just as a young teenager, I could do bricklaying, I could do concrete work, I could do plaster work, I could do plumbing. I did all those things.
Because he told you could, or because you wanted to? Like
No,
what
because
did your dad do?
he showed me. He ran a big hardware store, and so he sold all those kind of things, and we were able to pick them up because we had to do them for ourselves. And the other thing I think that I really was very blessed with is that I never did anything in my life for money. All I ever did is set out to enjoy myself. I did things that I liked doing, and one of the positive outcomes is that if you do something that you like doing, there's a pretty good chance that you don't have to be brilliant, but there's a pretty good chance that you're going to get good at it. If you do something that you enjoy doing and you do it enough, you will get good at it. And if you get good at doing something, people will pay you somewhere at some time in your life to do that thing for which you are good at. And I got lucky, I got good at a number of things and made money doing them, not because I set out to make money, I just did it and the money just came to me. And I was never, ever, I can truthfully say this, I was never inspired in my life to do anything for money.
Yeah.
I just did it because I wanted to do it, and I was blessed with the fortune that somehow or other it worked in my favor. Not that it was easy, it was very difficult.
Right. Because you were dedicated to what you love. Rather
Yeah,
than
I
inspired
was
by something
focused on it.
else. Yeah.
And when I get focused, a bomb can go off behind me, and I won't even hear it. I'm
Even though you said ADD.
totally. Yeah, but that's a different thing. You see, having a limited attention span, for instance, means that if you take up a particular activity, say that you take up golf, we'll say that now that's just one sport, but let's say you take it up now. I find that within, say, a year or so, I can probably get 90% as good as I'll ever get. Now, do I want to spend the rest of my life attaining the other 10% and get famous and, achieve perfection? No, the answer is not. When I've got 90%, I've said, well, I've probably learned most of the things I'm going to learn about that thing.
Yeah.
So what's
Right.
next? So I go on to the next thing. And that's what I mean by a limited attention span. That doesn't mean just jumping from one thing to another. It's realizing when you've achieved a certain level, in that discipline or subject, and that there's not much point in flogging a dead horse anymore. Just go on to something new. And like I said, you can have bad experiences, but you can't experience bad things. It's really that's at the root of it.
But I mean, I would say most people think they should stick to one thing, one career, and if you succeed, then great. If not, that's okay. But for me, it was really hard for people to put me into a box. Like, are you an actress? Are you a comedian? If you're a comedian, we can work with that and we'll sell you as a
Sure.
comedian.
Right.
If you're an actress, if you're a philanthropist, if you're an animal person, like I had I had like 7 things: voiceover artist, comedian, actress, philanthropist. Nobody knew. In fact, I had a manager turn me down and say, I don't know what to do with you. I don't know how to sell you. And I looked at her and I said, well, I'm not willing to sell myself as one thing. These are me. And because I didn't make a living 1 year at acting, I did
Right.
infomercials.
Of course.
Because 1 year I didn't make that, I made voiceovers. So for me, all of the different things that I was good at helped me succeed. But she was looking at, I don't know how to sell you. And I thought to myself, then you don't know as a manager how to be creative. Because to me, it's not necessarily, most people think they have to dedicate. And back in the day, you worked on the farm your whole life. You did this your whole life.
Of course. Yeah. But
Nowadays,
isn't that a boring
it's
life?
right. But if you have different, for me, it's confusing, and I've met a lot of people that feel the same way. I'm so confused because I'm so good at a bunch of different things that I do a little of this and a little of this and a little of this, but nobody tells me, and that's made my career so successful. Most people who have a lot of money will say, pick one thing, focus on that, and go. I'm like, well, I'm not going to leave behind the animals. I'm not going to leave behind my philanthropy or my voiceover or this.
Right.
So how do you decide? I mean, because you seem to be successful with all these talents, from playing the guitar to the flute to, being a chemist to like, how are you able to? And as a female, I look at it and I think it's a man thing. Well, the world takes you more seriously as a man. They just do. In any profession. So it's doubly as hard to walk into a group of physicists and say, I have a new concept.
Right.
And I got blonde hair down to my shoulder, whatever. So it's like, how do you explain to be successful with a lot of different interests?
Well, I think in some ways you're sort of, if someone were to ask me to describe you, I would attribute the same description to you as was once attributed to myself. And somebody at the university once said to me that after he'd got to know me a little bit, he said, you are a multi-scented, random layered glass onion. That was his...
Wait, say it again.
A multi-scented, random layered glass onion.
I love it.
And you are that way too. You're a multi-scented, random layered glass onion. One can see right through you to all of these different centers that's in there. And because of that, you're a much more interesting person. And you have to understand that being a multi-scented, random layered glass onion is part of your success story.
I think that is an actual song.
That is your
multi-layered,
multi-scented, random layered glass onion, because you can see through all these layers into all these different centers. And this is what makes you interesting and makes you fascinating. You're not an onion like all the other onions with one center and layers, and when you cut it in half from any direction, it looks exactly the same. That's boring and not very fulfilling as a life story.
right?
But if you can look at your life and hold yourself up and say, this is what I am I not more interesting than this other onion over here? Of course I am. And provided that you put passion into everything you do in your life, which I've been blessed with a lot of passion in my life. And most of the things I've done with a great deal of passion. I've loved them, I've slept them, lived them. I've done everything about them. And then when the time was up and I said, yes, I've done the 90% thing. Now what do I want to do? And I'm always looking around the corner for the next thing with excitement and joy.
Yes.
And so each time the page turns over, I'm filled with excitement, wondering what's going to be, not with dread and fear about what it might or might not be. And that's very important, that each time the page turns over, and I must have reinvented myself in this life, I don't know how many times, but
So many
I'm
times.
always excited to want to know what's in store for me.
So there wasn't a moment, like you say, I'm living a page-turning moment, which helps me get through this, because I'm like, what the hell am I doing living in my parents' place? They're coming back in November. I mean, I'm doing this random job, which it's look, ultimately, I'm excited because it's an activity job, and I know each activity I do that I can do for free, like the helicopter ride, I'm going to meet that person and tell them I can do a video for you and bring that to your business. Like, I'm always wanting to just not do it, but bring something to it. But it seems like if I'm not attached to that, it's very hard for me to live in this space right now
Well,
I'm always not knowing.
most people
Look,
are
Brian,
afraid of change, aren't they? It's natural.
Yeah, it's
It takes us out
natural.
of our comfort zone.
Right,
Change.
but living as an actress or
Yeah.
whatever I am in LA, like I was just talking to a person I'm working with who's like 19, and I'm explaining to him, and he already worked in sales, and I said, acting is like sales. You put yourself out there, but they're not rejecting the product; they're rejecting you. So over and over again, you have that for years and years and years, and you have an amount of success, and it's okay. But then you get to a place where you go, it's not worth my time and energy. Like I would have fantasies, Brian, and I was on TV, fantasies about pouring wine for people and talking to them on salary, just enough to live. And I'm like, why am I having fantasies about the most simple job in the world when people are having fantasies about being on TV like me? And I want to let them know, yes, it was amazing, only because I'm working with animals, by the way. Otherwise, it was not fun. But ultimately, what in the world am I doing if I completely give up my soul to again and again do the same thing month after month, be on TV, but it's not who I am and what I have to offer is so much more than this. And I knew that. So I outgrew what I was doing. But then I'm left in a place where I'm like, but now what? It's not like they go, oh, well, you outgrew it and you met someone who wants you to do that and now you're making even more money. No, I outgrew it and I'm sitting here in my fucking parents' place. They come back in November and I'm going, what the hell am I doing? Like, what
Well,
am I doing? And you're
I
looking
think-
at me going, you're just a chapter.
I think
It's just a
yes, but
chapter.
let me give you another small analogy. I learned to play Native American flute, and anyway, I met this Indian lady, and she wanted to play Native American flute because she sold them. And so she asked me would I teach her to play Native American flute, and I thought this was rather ironical and humorous.
Yeah, right.
And so once we'd both got over the humor of this white man teaching this Indian lady how to play
play
a
the
Native American flute,
Yes.
we got by that fairly quickly. And then she said to me, what's the one thing that's the most important about playing the flute? And I said to her, you know, after I thought a little bit, I said the most important thing if you want to play the American flute is to have soul in this music. And the way that you get soul into the music, it's not the notes. The most important thing about playing the flute is the space that you leave between the notes, because it's the space that defines the note, and therefore it's the turning of the page that defines the pages on either side. And so therefore when you're going through a transition in life where when you're turning that page, you have to savor all of the emotions and turn the page slowly, because the page will be turned quickly and then you have a long time to read what's on the other side. So rejoice in all of the emotions and the uncertainty that you get from turning the page, because sooner or later the page will be turned and you'll be doing something totally new. And when we look back in our lives, we always look back with the most fondness on the times when we turned the page, and wish that we'd spent more times enjoying and savoring all of the emotions, the anxiety, the thrill, the uncertainty of what goes with that whole act of living in between two spaces. And it's like the space between the notes is the most important part of the song.
I remember seeing David Letterman interview my favorite actors in the world, and he said, a comedy actor as well, from the 50s and 60s, and he said, David's like, you've lived this most amazing life, all these movies, all these awards. He won like 18 Academy Awards. And David said, what's your favorite moment that you remember? And you know what he said? Not when I won the awards, not when I had the 3 helms, not when I was like, had the wife and the kids and whatever. He said, it was when me and my friends were trying to think up a new joke. It was like for a Saturday Night Live skit. And he said, and we were all eating pizza, didn't know how we were going to pay rent, literally. They were all in the same, and they were bouncing back and forth ideas, drinking like $2 chuck. Like nobody had money. And he's like, the struggle. He literally said, I miss the struggle.
Of course.
I missed the struggle because it was raw. I didn't know what was going to happen. And I was just so miserable. And I cried every night. And yet those moments where he was with Gilda Radner and John Belushi and all that, like he was going, oh my God, I miss that. And I think about my life, and the happiest time in my life was not when I booked the Animal Planet show. I mean, that was a moment I was like, this is surreal. But it was 6 months before that moment when I was in a box theater, like off of Hollywood, that was like barely anyone went. But when you invited them, it was 50 seats. So look, 5 of us in a sketch comedy group. We only need 9 people apiece. I wrote all the sketches, like 80% of the sketches, from actual moments in my life. My, at the time, boyfriend, best friend, and best girlfriend. That was 3 of the people in the show. And then 2 other people. And we did that show as like an experiment. Like, let's just do this. By week 6, because we had it perfected then, right? I sat there in this little tiny box theater off of Hollywood that nobody cared about. Nobody wrote about it in any magazine. And I sat there after we performed one night, and the next group went up. Those were the better people. Like, that was like the warm-up for Saturday Night Live. They went up. I sat there because you could bring in wine. I was drinking $2 chalk, which I never would do now, out of a bottle with my friends. We just did our performance, and we watched it. And I literally looked over and I said, I got my best friend to my left, my other guy best friend to my right, the guy I'm dating is in the show. And we're creating. I almost looked up in the universe and I said, this right now, I can die. I am the happiest I've ever been. It has nothing to do with money, homes. No, I just literally said, I remember taking one swig of $2 chuck in a paper bag, looking at the stage, this little tiny stage, and I went, I will never forget this moment. And a month later, I booked the Animal Planet show, and things took off from there. But the people say, what's the happiest moment in your life? I'm not going to say when I got the show, when I did this, no. It would be the moment in this tiny box theater where I said, the 3 main people I love in my life are with me performing, and we are laughing and creating, and we're making other people laugh. And I just said, I'm done. I can die now.
Well, you know, quite often there's 2 sides to that coin. I can remember the day when somebody wrote me a check for $1 million, and I had that check sitting on my desk.
Well, I'll say that would be my next favorite moment. Just
actually,
saying, not cutting that out.
Actually, I was as miserable as sin that day.
Well,
And
I'll help you with that.
I couldn't understand that one. that I was sitting there saying,
well,
I should be as happy as heck.
I'll help you feel good about that one.
But you know, some of the times when I was struggling, as you put it, when I first came to Canada, and because I'd turned down a job in the United States working at MIT, because they wanted me to work on a basically a poison and chemical warfare type program, and I wasn't going to do that.
Right.
So I walked out that office with basically $50 in my pocket, no country, nowhere to go, and eventually hitched a ride back into Western Canada to Vancouver, and I slept in the back of a beer truck with a blanket over me. And I used to go into the supermarket and steal my food out the supermarket to
and
eat.
you had the beer, so hashtag win-win.
And I was actually quite happy. And I remember the first Christmas I spent there. I was actually living upstairs in a local mortuary, if you can imagine that.
Wow.
And the gentleman.
Did it kill you?
Well, the gentleman that owned the mortuary, Christmas Eve, he came knocking on my door, and he looked like Abraham Lincoln with a big tall hat, and he looked exactly like what you'd expect a mortician to look like. He was completely the part. And anyway, after he'd introduced himself to me, he said, you know, I'm one of only 2 people in British Columbia that has a license to practice plastic surgery on cadavers. He said, would you like to come and see me do an operation?
Well, you know what? So, Merry Christmas, Christmas Eve.
So that's where I spent
Come,
Christmas
they
Eve.
told me, cut, they told
Yeah.
me, pa rum pa pum pum.
And that's what I did. I spent Christmas Eve downstairs in the basement watching him put the nice smile back on this young boy's face who killed himself in a motorcycle accident. And I thought to myself,
Easiest-
you
this
know,
is the moment I'll never forget.
I
the
will
rest
never
of my
forget
life.
this Christmas.
Ever.
I never have.
Right?
That was, you know, adversity. And I was thinking
God.
about all my friends back in Liverpool all partying it up and having a wonderful time. And I was sitting there watching this operation and all this blood run off the side of the table, and the tears were rolling down my cheeks there because I was so sad, but at the same time I was so happy as well.
Right.
You know,
She's like, this is a
because-
moment I will never
and I knew
forget.
at the moment I lived that moment, I
Yes.
savored it. I said, remember what the saying you had when you were a child, you know, you can have bad experiences, but you know, you can experience bad things, but you can never have a bad experience. And you know, that was an experience, and I savored it and enjoyed it, and I wouldn't swap it for anything, because I've had 50 Christmases since then, all of which have been very pleasant, and I can't remember one of them. I can't remember one of them, but I sat
It's
there,
one
and that's the
moment.
one I remember.
That's what you remember because it's something that stands out from anything you ever do
Yeah.
at any moment in any time, and you say this is weird, but it's living because it's
That's when you're most alive.
yes.
And I had another experience one time when I was teaching an advanced sailing program on Lake Winnipeg to you know, a number of experienced sailors, and during that particular day we were miles and miles from anywhere offshore, and a huge storm overtook us, and the waves were so steep and deep that we could actually see the bottom of the lake that we were sailing on, and we knew that if the boat hit the bottom of the lake it would just be
Done.
destroyed, and
Yeah.
we'd all die instantly.
Right.
And during that afternoon, one of the students, who was an elderly gentleman, very nice man, fell off the boat, and I can remember seeing him go past the boat with the blood on his face, and he had a sad look on his face because he knew he was a goner, and that the chances of picking anybody up under those conditions were slim to none. Anyway, fortunately we had practiced man overboard drill using a particular scheme that I'd invented some years ago, and so immediately we sprung into action and did this man overboard drill. And as the boat dove down into the waves, I crawled up on the foredeck with my floater coat with double lifelines on, and I was able to grab a hold of him, and in the next wave I was able to pull him up over the lifelines, and I ended up landing on top of him like that. And all that time that this was going on, I ended up lying on top, and he looked up at me with this look of thankfulness on his face, and I looked down and I said to him, you know, I just had a baby daughter, and I'm going to call her Gail. And I looked at my watch, and when I went back to the yacht club that night when we finally got home,
Yeah.
there was a phone call waiting there to tell me that my girlfriend at the time had given birth to this baby girl at the same time. And that was a most
No.
amazing experience for me there. And that was all I was focused on at the time, picking that man overboard. I wasn't hardly thinking of him. I was thinking about what was going on back home. And it's moments like that where there's great adversity again that you never forget them. That's what your life is made from.
The dichotomy of the beauty
Yeah.
and the pain at the same time, which is, it's kind of like the light between the cracks.
It's the mortar that holds the bricks together.
The more
And-
they'll do this.
And it's that mortar of these life's experiences where you've gone through adversity and come out on the other side, and those are the things that build character and make it easier for the next time when you're faced with some kind of adversity,
It builds
because you've done it
muscle.
all.
Yeah,
And
the strength.
I remember a student to me once asking me when I was teaching a heavy weather program, a student put their hand up and said to me, when you go out on the water, what scares you? What are you frightened of?
Right.
And so I said, I thought for a moment, and I said, you know, when I went out sailing, the first 3-foot wave I ever saw that looked like it was going to swamp the boat scared the heck
Yeah.
out of me.
Right.
And I said, but after a little while, I'd seen quite a lot of 3-foot waves. And then one day, a 5-foot wave came along, and it scared the crap out of me, and it flooded the top of the boat. But then after a while, I'd seen a lot of 5-foot waves, and they didn't bother me anymore. And I said, right now, my threshold fear is about a 40-foot wave. And so I said, try and remember that when you see a 3-foot wave in the future, don't be scared by this, because tomorrow this is going to be commonplace.
Right,
You will
this will
deal
be
with
nothing.
it. Tomorrow will be a 5-foot wave, and you
Exactly.
will learn that.
It'll be nothing.
And so don't be fearful of those things. Don't let them dictate your life and the
Right.
way that you go about doing them,
Right.
because tomorrow is going to be better. It's going to be a bigger challenge, and you'll rise to it. And fortunately, I haven't seen anything bigger than a 40-foot wave to test my faith in the theory so far.
But it could be more.
Could be more.
Could be
but-
more.
And probably at this time of
might
life,
be at
I'm
some
hoping
point.
I'm hoping I won't see any more. But you know.